Welcome to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. Keola Racela is the director of one of Fangoria's newest acquisitions, Porno. Porno pits a hapless group of upright religious and abstinent teens against a deviant sex demon who they accidentally release by watching a satanic porn film one night at the theater they work at. Porno delivers laughs and scares in equal measure and is a downright blast of a movie. Porno is out now on VOD, and I highly recommend you all check it out. Porno is Keola's feature debut, and we get into the ins and outs of low-budget filmmaking, gore gags, and a particularly nut-busting sequence from Porno. Here, without further ado, is Porno director Keola Racela. First of all, congratulations on Porno. That was such a blast. I'm a kid of the 80s and 90s, so Encino Man was one of my favorite movies of all time. Yeah, Pauly Shore was like a hero of mine, but yeah, I loved that movie. I was one of those ones that I basically melted the VHS from just rewatching it all the time. Yeah, that was an awesome little shout out. So how did Porno come about to begin with? It seems like a very, very specific and close to your heart kind of a story. How did the movie get made? What was the inception for the idea? How did what we know as Porno come about?
Yeah, definitely not. It was definitely not made in the typical way. Basically, I had gone to film school with the two guys who were the writers, and we were living together through a big part of film school. And so, it was just a lot of nerding out and eating pizza and talking about films and being total dorks. But after film school ended, I stayed in New York. We all went to Columbia University, the grad program there. And I stayed in New York, and I was doing freelance work and writing. I was writing what I was like considering to be what would be my first feature. And they moved out to LA, and they worked as a writing team, and they were doing writing stuff. So it was going like that for maybe about a year or so after we graduated. And I was doing a lot of freelance work, and sometimes that kind of crowds the work that you actually want to be doing, just trying to get by. And so I had done a bunch of infomercials. I was like doing editing and special effects and stuff.
Yeah.
And so I had done a bunch of infomercials and had amassed enough money to like stop doing freelance work and really like drill down on my script, which I was excited to do. And right around the time that I was kind of like saying goodbye to freelance stuff, I got a call from Matt and Lawrence, the writers, and our other classmate, Chris Cole, who's the producer of the film. They called me, all three of them were like, "Do you want to make a movie?" And I was like, "Yes, obviously, yes." And they're like, "Okay, come out here. We're going to make a movie." And I was like, "What? Well, what is the movie?" And they're like, "We don't know yet. It's a horror movie." And I was like, "What?" And I was like, "Do you guys have an idea?" And they were like, "No." But if you come out here, we can make a film. And I was like, "Is this real?" They're like, "If we move fast, it's real." And so, that was kind of it. That was like, almost the length of the phone call was that. But so Chris knew this financier who was like interested in making a super low budget horror film, but the stipulation was that it had to be done within a certain time frame.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I booked a ticket that day and flew out to LA. We holed up in a Airbnb for a week. We outlined the script, and then they wrote the first draft in 4 days.
Whoa.
So that was like, and then we worked on the script a little bit, but basically that was like July, August, and then we shot the film in October, November.
Oh, wow. So you guys really were moving fast.
Yeah. So there was like no movie in July, and then we had finished shooting the movie in November. What was great was that Matt and Lawrence, because they're a writing team, they work on so many different kinds of things, but their their focus has really been, as far as like features go, like horror ideas. And so they had this like bank of log lines basically of like, oh, isn't this a fun idea, or isn't this a, can this be a good premise? And one of them was this idea for a haunted porno movie theater in Times Square. So I think originally the kind of like seed of the idea was that, it was set in like Giuliani era New York.
Oh, nice. The last of the porn theaters.
Times Square. Right, exactly. And these like suburban kids who have never seen any porn kind of make a pilgrimage out to Times Square to check out a porno theater before they all get shut down. And it turns out to be a haunted porno theater. So that was kind of the basic seed of the idea that we chose from their big bank of ideas.
Nice.
To spin out into this thing.
Cool. And
so
you guys,
that's pretty much how it came about.
Nice. And you shot in New York, right? Not in the city, but you shot.
Yeah. So originally we were going to shoot in LA. Like, the idea is I would come out there, we would write it, we would shoot it out there. I'm from Southern California. So, in my town, there is this kind of like, I grew up going to this like single screen, classic, like movie theater, small town movie theater.
Nice.
And so we were like, oh, maybe we'll shoot there. But the problem was that we couldn't find a theater that was not so run down that we had to drag the entire thing or renovate the entire theater.
Okay.
And we couldn't really use a working movie theater because it would be too insane. Right. Like, and movie theaters run except for pandemics, they run year round. Right. So we were just kind of, hustling to try and find a place to shoot. And there was a bit of luck. I feel like there's this weird little movie was kind of blessed with a lot of luck, but at Columbia, there are 3 tracks. You can be a writer, a director, or a producer. So for the producing track, the producing faculty would bring in the president of AMC, not the theaters, but the network, who was a friend of the faculty. And he would give a lecture about TV production and all of that stuff. And, was super friendly with the students and very nice. And so our other producer, Sarah, reached out to him because it turns out he owned a movie theater in Greenport, Long Island, which was seasonal. So it's a seasonal town. So it's closed during the winter. So that's how he said, he was like, yeah, because of the Columbia connection, was just like, yeah, sure, you guys can shoot there. And we're like, can we paint the walls and do weird stuff? And he's like, yeah, I don't care. Nice. He thought it was, I think he was like very amused by the whole thing. And gave awesome. It to us for basically nothing. And that's how we ended up in Greenport, Long Island instead of, LA.
Oh, cool. And how long was the shoot? How long were you guys out there for?
We were out there for, I would say, I don't know, a couple, maybe 3 weeks before we started shooting, just doing prep. I was living in Brooklyn at the time, so a lot of it was just like going back and forth, driving back and forth to Greenport. But the shoot was 22 days.
Okay. Got it. Cool. Yeah, and I think for me, one of the most fascinating things was the movie within the movie, the actual satanic porn film that they watched. It would visually, it was just. I wanted like a feature. The weird pervy horror fan in me wanted a feature length version of that. Can you talk about the influences of the movie within the movie?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea, basically, the premise of the film is these kids find an old film reel and they watch it and they think it's pornography, but actually it's like a satanic film. And so we wanted something that, these kids who are very innocent, kind of like sexually repressed and sexually inexperienced kids would not immediately identify as satanic. And so we were thinking about Kenneth Anger. He was like the main influence, who's a queer Satanist experimental filmmaker.
Okay.
And the definition of pornography has shifted throughout the years, but definitely like you wouldn't watch that stuff today and be like, oh, this is pornography.
Mm-hmm.
You might watch it and be like, oh, this is satanic.
Right.
But we felt like if these kids had watched a Kenneth Anger film, they might be like, oh, this is porn. When really it was like something satanic.
Got
so he was the really the big inspiration in creating that film within the film. That was from the conceptual level, and the films that we looked at were Invocation of My Demon Brother and Inauguration of the Pleasure Dome, and all which you can like just watch in their entirety on YouTube. Right,
these are some of the greatest movie titles I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, that was a big inspiration. And then when it came time to actually like put it together, I edited the film as well.
Nice, really cool. So in terms of your actual research, how deep did you dive into actual demonology? It seemed like it was pretty well researched, the idea of, a succubus and like that. Did you delve into some unholy texts?
Yeah, I mean, I think we did a lot of Googling. I think the kind of like the big succubus movie is probably what's the Karen Kusama film?
Jennifer's Body.
Jennifer's Body, right? That's the kind of like the best, most famous like succubus movie, but like it doesn't really deal with the like mumbo jumbo kind of stuff that that tickles us. So we kind of we did a lot of Googling, and there's a lot of weird Reddits and online communities where people talk about like summoning a succubus and interacting with succubus creatures and stuff like that. And it's very strange, but the mythology is, it's a little bit thin. And so we were just kind of like, we're pulling from a lot of like online stuff to get ideas, and then kind of like, taking that and like composing our own stuff as well.
Really, really cool. Did you ever get into any territory that felt unsafe, where you're like, this is a little too intense, or this is too unholy, or did anything make you uncomfortable?
Like, you mean like something was too satanic?
Yeah. Or you were afraid you were going to awaken something just by reading it?
No, I don't think we ever got there. I mean, if you look up the kind of like the origin of the idea for the succubus, it's super interesting. It's like it's the idea is that this creature that like steals the seed of men, basically. Mm-hmm. And then there's the kind of like male counterpart, which is the incubus, which is the creature that like takes this seed and plants it in women and impregnates them. And it's all a kind of a kind of like fairy tale or like metaphor for like I don't know. I think like men who like have wet dreams or whatever, or women
sounds
who
about
have,
right.
Like, unplanned, or women who have like unplanned pregnancies, and so it felt kind of like the origin of these kind of creatures, and their kind of function in morality, just felt kind of like a right fit for our characters. But no, there was nothing ever like super satanic where we felt like we were crossing some sort of like dark boundary. Although there are a lot of I really feel like the Venn diagram of like people who post on these weird Reddit forums and like incels are like some sort of it's a pretty heavy overlap.
Yeah. That could be your sequel. Doing something about the incel Reddit, the succubus community.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. So obviously there was a lot of 90s love in the movie. Were there any kind of core 90s classics that you felt were at the heart of this movie that were sort of, had that the soul of a certain 90s movies were reflected in this movie?
No, I mean, I feel like the kind of inspiration I had was the movie The Lost Boys, which is I think maybe an all-time favorite horror movie of mine. and The Breakfast Club, but that's like an 80s movie. I don't I don't know. I mean, I think that like I'm definitely not like the foremost historian on horror films, but it feels like in the 90s horror films became a little bit more self-aware, you know, kind of like leading up to Scream, which is, you know, obviously like the most kind of like self-aware, self-referential horror movie. But yeah, I mean, for me, the inspirations were like Lost Boys and Breakfast Club, and definitely Evil Dead. It's so funny because I had not seen Evil Dead in a while, and I rewatched it, and I was like, oh my god, we just made Evil Dead.
Oops. Yeah, the girl on the second floor
you know,
did this exact same thing.
Yeah. but yeah, I mean, that for me is like an all-time great film, and especially like the sequels and their blend of like horror and comedy were big inspirations. I know for Matt Lawrence, Superbad was also like a big, I think, kind of influence as well.
Oh, nice. Well, speaking of horror and comedy, it's kind of rare to have one that works on both levels. It seems like it's a really difficult balance because, I mean, the movie did have some legitimate scares in it, but it also was really funny at the same time. So it was one I've heard in the past that the ideal balance to make horror and comedy work is 80% scary, 20% funny. And the movie just felt really beautifully balanced in terms of horror and comedy. So I was wondering how you approached that, how you approached the humor, but while also making sure it was legitimately scary.
I think that a lot of the humor just is inherent to the premise.
Right.
So I think that, I don't know that what was the ratio you said? 80-20?
80-20, scary to funny, yeah.
Yeah, we may have flipped the ratio on that one. I don't know. I mean, I hope people find it both scary and funny. But yeah, I mean, I think that like there was maybe the intention to make it scarier, but then once we started writing it, it just, you know, some things are just grow organically, and so it's maybe the benefit of not having a lot of time to rethink what you're doing, because we were kind of like running the entire time. You know, the draft that came out, I was like, oh, well, I guess this is going to be a lot funnier than it is scary. But as far as like, you know, my approach directing it, I think that you know, I just tried to because the premise is so crazy, I just had the actors play it straight mostly. You know, I love like Airplane and Naked Gun and all of those kind of like, you know, frontline, like we're being funny kind of movies. But a lot of the humor that I really like, and I think the humor that is in the script is kind of, everything is played straight and earnestly, and the humor comes from the circumstances.
Yeah. Was that a note that you gave the actors from day one? Like, listen, there might be some funny subject matter here, but you guys all have to play it straight in order for it to work?
No, I mean, I think that also happened organically. I think we did a table read the night. I mean, you know, we cast the actors, and I didn't, you know, one of them I hadn't met in person. I basically cast the actress that plays Chaz over Skype.
Oh, cool!
because we had another actor fall out, and I didn't meet her till the day before we started shooting. We did this table read, and we read it through, and it was just, you know, I think the characters, the way they're written, they're so sincere, and a lot of you know, innocent, and a lot of the humor comes from it. And I think they've really keyed into that. It wasn't until, and this wasn't even a direct conversation with me, but one of the other actors told me, but we staggered the arrival of the actors based on, you know, our shooting schedule. And so the actor who plays Mr. Pike, Bill Phillips, came in, and we'd already been shooting for like a week or two. And he asked the other actors, he's like, tonally, what are we doing here? and they were like, "Oh no, we're playing it completely straight." And he was like, "Oh, okay, good." Because I think that, you read some of the stuff that's in the script, and you're like, "Well, there's a way to make this like very cartoony," and it's not. It just I think wasn't really the tone that I wanted to go for.
Gotcha.
And wasn't really the intention, of the writers when they were writing it.
Nice. So one thing that you touched on earlier that was interesting is the idea that since you guys had such little time to get this thing written and then produced and then ultimately made, is that it sounds like the script was able to have a purity to it, that had you had more time to rewrite it and rethink it and potentially even overthink it, it possibly could have been watered down. I mean, it had like a real kind of fierce energy to it. And I've heard in the past, and Clive Barker is a big proponent of just always get the first draft out as fast as possible because it's the closest thing to the original idea. Did you find that moving fast was beneficial for the movie?
Yeah, I mean, what's great is, given infinite amount of time, you can, I think, just forever weigh one decision. And making a film is making a million decisions.
Right.
And so just having that kind of pressure to, just constantly being like yes or no, this way or that way, knowing that, ultimately we're going to have to go like shoot this thing in a very small amount of time, I think really, really focused everyone it was a lot of pressure, but I think that it ultimately benefited the film.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Cool. And I noticed that Sundance was somehow involved in the production of the film. Is that correct? The Sundance feature film program?
Yeah. So it's funny. So we were already in post production, and Chris, our producer, was like, "You should apply for the Sundance editing lab." And I was like, "Oh, that's interesting," because we were getting to the point where we were, we had a rough cut and we were showing it to people, and the idea of like taking it to a lab, especially because we all come out of film school, so this idea of like workshopping things and working with mentors is something that comes very naturally to all of us. I was like, "Oh, that sounds super appealing." Obviously, Sundance, the pedigree there is great and renowned, and so we were just like, I was super excited. So I submitted to that, and we did not get in. But they were like, "We don't really have a spot for you here." They would later tell me that they were like, "We don't really have advisors who advise on this kind of movie," which to their credit. And so then they recommended that I apply to the music and sound design lab. And that I got in there, which is this amazing program where they have composers apply to the program, and then they have filmmakers apply to the program, and then they match a composer with a film.
Oh, that's super cool.
Yeah, and then you fly to the Skywalker ranch.
No way.
And stay there for 10 days, and then they assign you a sound designer who works at Skywalker.
Holy shit.
And it was just an unbelievable program. And like I felt like, obviously, like I said before, like this film has had a lot of luck, and I felt so lucky that the people there were so incredible. That's how we ultimately ended up with the composer for our film, is Carla, who's incredible musician and songwriter, who I was paired with, and it was great. So you pick a couple segments of the film, and then you work with the composer, and they compose a piece, and then they live score it for you, and it's incredible. So that is how Sundance was involved with our film, and I think that any filmmaker, I would suggest if you can apply to that program, because it's unbelievable.
That's cool. Yeah, I was going to ask about the score, because the score, it was like exceptionally well done, and it had an iconicism to it as well. The score was awesome. That's really cool, though.
Yeah. Carla is incredible, and we really benefited from like having that environment to kind of just explore different sounds and tones, and then also getting feedback on compositions and stuff like that. And it was incredible. Definitely our film was the odd man out at that program. There were so many, like, I mean, their curation is incredible, and there were so many amazing films there, just like super things that you would consider like important films.
Right.
And then there was our like ball busting horror movie. So I definitely felt super lucky. Yeah,
that's super cool.
But a little bit like, I don't know, maybe we're more trailblazers. Maybe they'll accept more genre films there.
Yeah. It sounds like you guys might be kicking the door open for the rest of us. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of ball busting, the practical effects were really, really well done. And don't want to spoil anything, but there is a centerpiece practical effect that is, for lack of a better term, ball busting. Whose idea was that? How did that come to be? It was graphically realistic. I didn't look away for a second, but I was like, damn, that actually looks like the real deal. I'm trying not to spoiler alert it too much, but how
hell
did you get away with that?
So the idea for that particular gag just came from an offhand text message that I sent to Matt Lawrence. I was just like, such and such has to happen, or else I'm not doing the film. And they were like, ha 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 ha. And then they wrote it into the script, basically into the center of the film. It was amazing. Working with a low budget, you kind of have to pick and choose where you're gonna put the money, because there's so little of it. And we're all excited about the idea of working with practical effects. It's something that we all kind of like grew up on, and I think this it just makes everything, I think, a little bit better. And even when it doesn't really come off, there's a kind of like, I don't know, I think there's an amazing quality to it. And so so the idea is we work with practical effects, and then we have this big centerpiece thing, and that's kind of like where we put a lot of resources. And luckily it came off really well. We worked with these two guys, Brett Schmidt and Greg Pikulski, who are like super young, but super, super, super talented guys who are just kind of like, just again, lucky, right? When we approached them to do the film, they had just set up their studio, and they were just kind of like launching their thing. And so we kind of like found them right at the right time. And they were super game, and obviously their work is incredible. So
really, really cool. Yeah. I mean, having good practical effects in a movie makes such a difference, particularly now, as effects are definitely making a comeback in the wake of CGI fatigue that theater goers are collectively having. But
absolutely.
Really cool. This was your first feature, right? You've done some shorts and stuff in the past. So this being your first feature, were there any big major filmmaking lessons that you learned that you're going to utilize in your next movie?
Yeah, I came out of film school. I had made some shorts there, kind of like one kind of like a bigger short, and they're both of a certain scale. And then I did this HBO program, and I made a short with the HBO, which was an entirely different kind of experience. And a lot of, at least at Columbia, a lot of the kind of production experience you have is around shorts. And so, the first short I did at Columbia was shot on a backlot in Shanghai. It was like a period piece, and it was a kind of like big movie for a short. And so I felt like I feel pretty prepared. Like I feel prepared. This will be like shooting like 4 short films in a row, right? Like the same kind of schedule. But no, it was not like that at all. And I think the thing that really surprised me, and maybe this is a little bit like, I don't know, boring, but I was just the kind of like pace that you have to set, and the kind of like stamina that you have to have in order to shoot a feature is something I wasn't quite prepared for. We shot alternating 6-day and 5-day weeks with only a day break in between. So basically we shot 22 days and I only had 3 days off.
Whoa.
And it was like, it was super intense. And so, that was the kind of like the big lesson for me. I mean, I think that, my process is one of kind of like, I want to be over prepared when I go into set.
Right.
And so, and I learned that from film school, which is like, not only shot list, but like floor plans. And for more elaborate things, I like to also have storyboards and which is all to like, so when we especially moving super quickly, everybody knows what's going on. We make the most of our time.
Mm-hmm.
And also it just helps because things will go wrong. And the thing that you so meticulously planned will not be possible. And having a clear idea of what you're trying to do really is beneficial when you aren't able to do that thing. And it really helps to be able to kind of like improvise a new solution for anything that might arise.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like that's critical for filmmakers because typically you'll have these big grand ideas and very specific ideas, but when it comes time to film them, they may or may not work out. So having some sort of a guiding star for your movie, something that you can always lean on, whether you would call that a vision or what have you, but just a general sense of what you're trying to accomplish seems like that's a critical part because you're going to have to adapt on a dime as you're filming.
Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, there are a lot of people do it a lot of different ways, and there are some people who are very loose and come in without a real plan and figure it out. But just for me, knowing that we didn't have a lot of time, and it just felt like the kind of smartest thing to do.
Nice. So looking at the film in its entirety right now, what would you have invested more in and what would you have invested less in? I don't necessarily mean money. It could be time, effort, energy, or money, but what would you have invested in more? What would you have invested in less?
I know we talked about like, I don't know. I mean, it feels like, we talked about this earlier, but it feels like if we had invested more, no, I would have gotten more money for practical effects. There are a lot of things that there's a scene where, this is a spoiler, where like people kind of start exploding. Or the original idea was for that scene was that a big winged demon was supposed to fly down and swoop up some people, but
Ooh.
like we could not obviously we could not afford that, and so that was making the people explode was the thing that I kind of like. I was like, well, I can do this, or like breaking glass, or like doing like we couldn't afford a zoom lens. I would have liked to use a zoom lens.
Mm-hmm.
We had to use the basically the kind of like cheapest dolly you could find. I would have liked to have something a little bit better there. I mean, it feels like. I think for what we had, I tried to make the most kind of visually exciting film, but there are ideas and things I have that definitely in the next one we're gonna do. But
nice.
Yeah, I think that, and maybe a little bit more time and less. I don't know. What do people usually say when you ask them to spend less time on? I mean, we didn't spend a lot of time.
I've heard shot listing. Some people say they'll spend less time shot list. Most people just avoid the less part. But either shot listing or overthinking the writing and the story.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we benefited from not having a lot, so I don't know that we could have spent less time. I do think that I edited the film and I basically edit all of the stuff that I make, and I think in the future that was kind of a longer process because we wrapped basically in November, and then I spent the better part of the next year editing the film by myself.
Oh wow.
I wish that I definitely want to make that process shorter. And I think that I want to find like an editing collaborator who to work with, basically find an editor so that isn't such a protracted process.
Right. Right. Yeah.
But I mean, basically, I became an editor because we did not have a lot of money, so I would spend endless hours cutting the film, and we weren't paying me hourly. So
Right.
it's one of the ways that we saved money. So
Gotcha. So how did Shudder and Fangoria get involved?
how did Shudder and Fangoria get involved? So I basically, our film premiered at South by Southwest. Rest in peace, South by Southwest.
Oh, right.
Which was an amazing experience. That festival is just balls to the walls bonkers. My heart really breaks for the filmmakers who were supposed to show there this year. Especially for small films, having a kind of like stage like that to premiere your film is in kind of incredible. And so, and I know that we had a lot of hopes riding on it, and I can only imagine what those people are going through who aren't able to show their films. But right now South by Southwest, we had a sales company involved, and they were like, South by Southwest, nobody really gets offers at South by Southwest. It's more of a kind of like a fun festival, and it's not the kind of like, like a Toronto or a Sundance as far as like making big sales or whatever.
Right.
But we luckily had some interest kind of like out of the gate, and so we had a bunch of different offers, and it was a kind of a combination of people coming to the table, and when we heard that like Fangoria was interested, we were just like, oh. Everybody like kind of like picked up, and we're like, oh my god, and we all got super excited because they're amazing. Shudder was interested, and we were able to do I think a kind of deal where through Fangoria they partnered with Shudder, and we kind of got the best of all worlds in the end.
Very cool. So last couple of questions. As far as filmmaking and directing and writing, there's so many books out there and courses and a lot of resources, but a lot of them are written and made by people who haven't actually done it. So there's just the whole market is just, there's a lot of bullshit there. But were there any, as a filmmaker, formidable courses or books for you, either from film school or now or in general, either for your career, creative process, or directorial ability?
I'm looking at my bookshelf right now. Wait a minute. So, I mean, the big kind of like mind blowing book for me was a book by Alexander McKendrick called On Filmmaking. It's an incredible book. He directed The Sweet Smell of Success, and was an amazing British filmmaker. But it's a kind of like, I don't know. That book and the Sidney Lumet book, I find to be amazing. The Sidney Lumet book is so great because he just walks you through his entire, we rent out this space, and then the actors arrive, and they eat muffins and then have juice, and then we read through the script and we talk about that. And he's so open about his process and his day-to-day stuff, and it really makes you, I think a lot of it is what I enjoy about reading stuff like that is it's demystifying. I felt for a long time I didn't really even approach being a filmmaker because I felt like someone had to give me permission. There's this kind of this thing where there's a certain kind of exclusivity. And I think that the great thing about the Lumet book is that, he kind of like breaks all that down, and, he's talking about these great actors, but also how, they're just people and they're insecure. And, and the McKendrick book is a little bit more kind of esoteric, but there's just an amazing kind of mind expanding thing about the possibility of cinema. Those, and then the Walter Murch book, In the Blink of an Eye.
Oh yeah, that's a great one.
Basically my kind of where I come at filmmaking is from with a little bit of the mindset of an editor, and so that book is super great. And there's also an interview book with Walter Murch and Michael Ondaatje, which is a super, super, super great book to read. And people should check that out. But basically, because I was like, oh, I will never be able to direct a film, before film school, but I had taught myself how to do editing stuff, and so when I'm on set, I am thinking like an editor. I'm like cutting it all together, kind of in my mind as we're shooting it, and so the merch book is great.
Awesome. Well, cool, man. What's next for you?
Oh man, so Porno was supposed to come out April 10th in theaters.
Dude, I'm so sorry, by the way.
We're looking at now doing some sort of like No, it's it's so I think that I think everybody's going to come out of this with a who has a film and with a kind of crazy story, but
yeah.
I think we're looking now to do there people are setting up like these virtual cinemas, and so we're looking to do maybe a kind of like virtual cinema opening for the theater sometime in April, but it comes out on VOD May 8th.
Okay.
And then there's a physical in July, and then it'll be fall.
What happens in the fall?
Super excited that. And then, it starts streaming on Shudder.
Oh, great. Cool.
Yeah. So we're super, super, super excited about that stuff. And me and, writing, working on the next thing. I'm super excited about that. And, hope to be sharing that stuff soon.
Nice. Cool. Well, the movie was a whole bunch of fun, and I wish a huge congratulations on it. It was a blast. Any possibility of a sequel?
There have been talks. We definitely have like a collection of ideas, and so I think it's a conversation that we're gonna we're gonna have. I mean, we'll see how the film does. Hopefully, people like it. And I think we're game. We have a ton of really like fun ideas.
Very cool. Great.
For how to spin this out.
Awesome. Well, I'll be looking out for it, man. Thank you again for taking the time. This was a whole lot of fun.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Keola.
Okay, thanks, dude.
All right. Here, as always, are some key takeaways from this conversation with Keola Racela. Number one, always play it straight. When it comes to horror, there are countless movies that are intentionally campy, and as a result, they get cheesy. In some cases, this can be a good thing, but there's a fine line between exploitation and camp. And the way to ensure that your movie is taken seriously is to make sure the actors always play their roles straight and take the material seriously. If the actors wink at the camera too much, the audience just checks out. There are a lot of thoughts on the balance between humor and horror, and in Keola's case, he recommends ensuring that the actors keep their performances dramatic and that you let the humor come from the circumstances. Number two, move fast. Making a film is making a million decisions. Getting hung up on small details can be the silent death of your movie, or at least substantially slow things down. Keola and his filmmaking partners had a very small window to make Porno in, and they rose to the occasion. The momentum of the fast-paced pre-production and production imbued the movie with a sense of fun and hustle that was infectious to the cast and crew. In the world of filmmaking, overthinking is the enemy. Condensed timelines and limited resources require quick thinking and fast decisiveness, but can also enable opportunities. Many very established directors claim that they actually prefer working on lower budget movies because the limitations of time and money offer more opportunities for creativity. When you can't throw money at a challenge on set, you have to resort to your own resourcefulness and creative ingenuity, and this often results in very interesting and unexpected things happening on camera. There's also a creative purity that can occur when you're forced to move fast. Effects legend Steve Johnson often talks about how Clive Barker taught him that the first draft of everything is often the closest to the original idea, therefore the most pure. Because of this, it's important to vomit out the first draft of anything as quickly as possible, because the idea is less likely to be at the mercy of being watered down or ruined by overthinking and overdevelopment. Number 3, explore grants and programs. Keola applied to be part of the Sundance editing program, whereby he would have gotten a polished editor to work on his movie for free. Considering that he was making a movie about a sex demon that came out of a satanic porn film, it was kind of a long shot for Sundance to consider his movie. But in the end, he didn't get into the editing program, but applying to it got him the opportunity to get his movie scored by a professional composer, which really boosted the production value of the film substantially. So check out grants. Even if you don't think you have a shot at getting them, the application process may yield some unexpected opportunities. Number 4, every film needs a North Star. As a director, you need to have a strong understanding of exactly what you want to accomplish with your film. Not necessarily so you can ensure every single specific detail is accomplished, but so you can come up with plan B when your best laid plans go crashing and burning on production day. Keola mentioned that a number of larger ideas he had for the movie actually didn't work when it came time to shoot, and he had to quickly figure out new solutions right then and there on set. Luckily, he had a very strong vision for his movie and of his characters, so he could improvise solutions on the spot without having to go back to the drawing board. The distinction to be made here is not to make your vision for your movie so rigid and precious that every single last detail has to be shot exactly as you pictured it. No, the point is for your vision to be thorough enough to be adaptable to the inevitable trials and tribulations that come with making films. Having this kind of a North Star vision for your movie enables you to have the flexibility to improvise when those best laid plans go to shit on set. Furthermore, not having a solid vision for your film can make you prone to distractions, false starts, and dead ends, none of which serve your film. As the Cheshire Cat said to Alice during her trip to Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there. Knowing your destination enables you to adapt and get to where you're going through a different route when the trouble arises. All of this lets you move at the lightning fast speed required for indie filmmaking, all while remaining completely faithful to your film. Anyway, guys, thanks again for listening to the Nick Taylor Horror Show. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with your friends and family on social media. Don't forget to follow the show on Twitter and the Instagrams at I'm Nick Taylor. That's I am Nick Taylor. Thanks again for listening.